One of the most urgent tasks of our country is to decisively defeat the climate hysteria hoax.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday, and this is the best day of the week, not just because the weekend is almost here, but because this is the day the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show. My name is Jim Lakely. I'm Executive Vice President at Heartland Institute and your host. The Heartland Institute is an organization that has been around for 42 years, and we are known as the leading global think tank pushing back on climate alarmism. Heartland and this show bring you the data, the science, the truth that counters the climate alarmist narrative you've been fed every single day of your life. There is nothing else quite like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere. So I hope you will bring friends to view this live stream every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. And also like, share, and subscribe. And sure to leave your comments underneath this video. We do read them, and these all convince YouTube's very mysterious algorithm to get this show in front of even more people. And as a reminder, because big tech and the legacy media are not big fans of the way we cover climate and energy on this program, Heartland's YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS. That's heartland.org/TCRS. And you can join other friends of this program who help bring it to the world every single week. And we also want to thank our streaming partners who help us get this show out in front of a lot of people. JunkScience.com, CFACT, What's Up With That, CO2 Coalition, and our friends at Heartland UK Europe. Oh, we got a big show today, so let's get started. We have with us, as usual, Anthony Watts, Senior Fellow at the Heartland Institute and publisher of the world's most viewed website on climate change, What's Up With That. We have Sterling Burnett. He's the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute, and also known as the Archbishop of Ranterbury. We have Linnea Lukin, Research Fellow for Energy and Environment Policy at Heartland, and we are so happy to welcome for the first time a very special guest, Anika Sweetland. Anika is a former energy advisor with a degree in climate studies. She gave an address on her awakening to climate realism at Heartland's World Prosperity Forum just last month. You can find those videos right here on this very Heartland Institute YouTube channel. And she's now and also has been one of the UK's best public opponents of that country's stupid net zero policy and keeps a keen eye now on the climate communism of the European Union. Anika, so happy to have you on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. Really good.
Yes, and what's really neat is that when I first met you in Switzerland last month, you said that you were a fan of the show. You watched the show before we even met, and not every fan of the show gets to be a guest, so congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm genuinely a real life fan of this show. On Fridays, if I'm lucky, I'm out on my scooter, fully manual, none of this electric stuff, and listening to the show. And I feel like a kid again. And life feels good because there's something profoundly cathartic about hearing the truth spoken without apology. So, it is definitely one of my favorite shows.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're so happy to have you on the show today, and I'm sure you will not be a stranger. And before we get into the main part of this show, good reminder, Anika is going to be one of the speakers at the Heartland Institute's 16th International Conference on Climate Change, which is coming up April 8th and 9th in Washington, D.C. Space is limited, and it is starting to fill up pretty full. So if you want to join us and meet Anika and great speakers like Willie Soon, John Clauser, a Nobel Prize winner in physics, is going to be giving a keynote address. Because he knows from looking at the data that human-caused climate catastrophe is complete BS. You don't want to miss that. Our friends at CFACT and the CO2 Coalition and What's Up With That are co-hosts of this event. It is the place you need to be if you're interested in this topic and really interested in learning the very truth about this topic. There is no other climate conference like this anywhere. And we are the ones who've always put it together with our friends and co-hosts. So go to heartland.org. You can see a feature right there on the front page that'll take you to the special climateconference.heartland.org website, where you can learn more information, look at the program as it's coming together, look at our speaker list so far, and also get your tickets. You're not going to want to miss it. April 8th and 9th, coming up sooner than you think, in Washington, D.C. at the Hotel Washington, just across, just a block away from the White House. So it's a great time to be in D.C. All right. So with that out of the way, I want to start our show as we always do with the crazy climate news of the week. Hit it, Andy. Thank you very much, Bill Nye. We'd be happy to have you debate somebody on climate change at our conference, by the way, if you're interested in coming. So just let me know. Jay Lakely at heartland.org, and we can make that arrangement. All right. Our first item today I've titled Chop Chop Dummies. This comes to our good friend Jo Nova in Australia from her great blog, joannova.com.au. Headline is Scientists' New Plan to Save the World by Chopping Down Boreal Forest and Tossing It into the Arctic Ocean. Joe writes, the Great Northern Boreal Forest has expanded by 12% since 1984, which means it has locked up all this extra carbon in it. Instead of waiting for it to catch fire and burn, the thinking is that we could cut it down now and throw the logs in a river that leads to the Arctic Ocean, where they will sink eventually, maybe, and take carbon to the sea floor. The journal New Scientist thought this was a good idea. Future anthropologists may file modern ecoscience with arsenic cures and radium toothpaste. In order to save the environment, says New Scientist, I guess, we need to cut down 180,000 square kilometers of forest and toss it into the river every year. And Joe Nova asks, how many trees do we have to kill to stop a cyclone in 2100 AD? And I had a peek over at the New Scientist article to kind of get where are they coming from with this. And they write, cutting down boreal forests and sinking the felled trees in the depths of the Arctic Ocean could remove up to 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year, but it could come at a cost to the Arctic ecosystem, you don't say. Coniferous trees prone to wildfires could be felled and carried to the ocean by 6 major Arctic rivers, including the Yukon and Mackenzie, where they would sink in about a year, according to a team of researchers. There is now a forest, quote, there is now a forest that is sequestering lots of carbon. But now the next thing is how to store it in a way that won't get burned, said Ulf Buntken of the University of Cambridge. All right, that's enough of that nonsense. Anthony, I'll start with you because you picked this one for us this week. So you win. This is, without a doubt, the craziest climate news of the week. Can you work out how this even works?
Well, this is one of those things where the scientists that never get out of the office and live in the real world come up with these crazy ideas that they think will work based on models and calculations and whatever. It is. They also don't pay any attention to unintended consequences. What are the unintended consequences of totally, making the Arctic full of logs? Is there going to be a beaver population explosion, which then brings in more wolves or whatever? I mean, they just don't know. And it's just like the whole idea that was pushed a few years ago where let's put some iron filings and iron oxide rust into the ocean to help make the plankton go, and that'll sequester more carbon dioxide. And it's just nuts. It is just nuts. They don't have a clue. This is just another appeal to feel-goodedness. We're saving the planet, and listen to us. We're scientists. We know what we're talking about. When they really don't. They have no idea what will happen down the road. And quite frankly, why would we want to throw away all that wood? It's usable. You can still sequester wood by putting it into buildings or whatever. You don't have to sink it in the Arctic. The whole idea is just beyond absurd.
Right.
How
Now,
dare you.
Sterling, actually, I could have been wrong in our discussions this week. You may have actually picked this crazy story. But look, I'm trying to figure this out. So we use the trees to sequester CO2. Then we determine, by the experts, will determine when they have served their useful purpose. And then we cut them down. And then we send them to the Arctic Ocean. And then what? Do we plant new trees? I mean, What's the carbon footprint of carrying out this crazy scheme anyway?
Look, this is idiotic from the get-go. First off, as I wrote in Climate Change Weekly this week, the boreal forest is actually expanding. And all these young trees that are growing are absorbing more carbon. It's completely throwing a monkey wrench into the carbon balance that is assumed in climate models, because the forests are taking up more CO2 than they assume. And these guys say, oh, well, forests, which are absorbing carbon, let's cut them down now before they might possibly catch fire. Now, I've got no problem with logging. I have advocated logging for a long time in national forests. What we know is older trees, real old trees, stop absorbing carbon and start putting carbon back into the atmosphere. And then, of course, there can be forest fires. So they want to just clear cut whole swaths of forest rather than sort of selectively cutting the trees that have reached their maximum absorption and started to go downhill. And as Anthony points out, why throw them into the ocean or the river to get down to the ocean eventually, as opposed to building houses where they also will not rot, building all sorts of things that stores that carbon. It stays there. It's not like it's leaking out while it's in your main patio chair. And now I'm going to disagree with Anthony on one thing. The iron filings is not a stupid idea. I've advocated it for a long time. And the reason is it's good for ocean life. I don't care what it does for carbon. What it does is you put them in the dead spots of the ocean and it creates the whole food chain, which is good. We have more fish, we have more plankton, we have more everything that the oceans seem to like. Why just leave dead spots of the ocean dead when we can make it better? And if you're worried about CO2, take CO2 out of the atmosphere.
Well, look,
cutting down trees.
They say, I mean, the trees will float. I mean, have you guys ever seen pictures of the logging industry from the early 20th century? Look, hey, polar bears need something to play with up there besides seals. And so they might have a little fun on those floating logs. Yeah,
well, we created our only natural lake here in Texas due to floating logs. But this is just a stupid, really. What's that movie? Really, really very bad day. Well, this is a stupid, very bad idea.
All right. Any other comments before we move on? There's lots of crazy stuff.
Yeah, look, I'm a bit more cynical in believing that this is nothing more than another piece in their puzzle to destroy our natural world. Back in the early global warming days, deforestation was evil. And once again, they've moved the goalpost to suit their narrative. Now they're pro-deforestation all of a sudden. There are some unique habitats and ecosystems in these forests, and to destroy them, first of all, goes against all of their biodiversity propaganda. Surely they wouldn't want to accelerate their mythic sixth mass extinction event. So I think we need to take a little bit of a closer look as to how the removal of these trees is going to benefit their financial interests. There will be a money trail. We just need to find it.
Good point. For sure. And I find it ironic that they steadfastly refuse to thin out the tinderbox forests of California, which Anthony knows very well. Yet this scheme here is in place, or is proposed at least. It's never going to happen.
Well, we've got ways to deal with forest fires. Timber logging is one of them, but just clear cut logging, you can fight forest fires. There's all sorts of things you can do. Right. But my suspicion is if you log these things to store the carbon, you're going to lose as much in carbon absorption as you would end up putting out into the atmosphere. Remember, it all balances. The CO2 is locked up in them. If it burns, it reaches the atmosphere. If it goes into the ocean, they're no longer taking that amount of carbon out of the atmosphere.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, speaking of California, our second item today, I titled Unrefined California Idiocy. This comes from our good friends at the Daily Caller. Headline, California importing foreign fuel after running refineries out of town. So you may have noticed that, Governor Gavin Newsom has been preening on social media all week about because Trump got rid of the endangerment funding for carbon dioxide through the EPA, that he says that Trump might be giving up on stopping climate change, but California won't. Well, this one cost of this is having one of the highest gas prices in the nation in California. Truly stupid policies. So good luck running for president of the United States on that record. But anyway, let me read from the story a bit. So California imported a record amount of gasoline in November after major refinery closures tied to years of Golden State leaders imposing strict regulations, according to Bloomberg News. Over 40% of imported gasoline to California hailed from the Bahamas, with Asian nations like Japan and India contributing additional volume. According to data from Vortexa, California politicians have imposed harsh regulations on the oil and gas industry for years, enacting America's highest tax on gasoline and implementing a cap and trade program for emissions that some policy experts have linked to rising energy costs in the state. That's exactly why. The state has the most expensive gas prices in the nation at $4.58 a gallon, standing in contrast with a national average of $2.92 a gallon, according to the most recent AAA data. Bloomberg News reported that added shipping expenses are further burdening California's already costly gas market. Two major refineries are also closing shop in California, with Phillips 66 winding down its California refinery, while Valero is set to shutter its Benicia facility and a record $1 billion write-down on their books. Bloomberg News reported that the Bahamian trade route is now a crucial part of California's strained supply chain, with 2 tankers carrying gasoline arriving from the Bahamas in 2026 so far. In 2025, California imported more gasoline from the Bahamas than it had in the 9 preceding years combined. Linnea, you are still a trained petroleum engineer, so I want to go to you first. This does not seem a very efficient way to go about this, and is doing more harm to the climate, if you actually believe carbon dioxide emissions seriously harm the climate. But we should take Gavin Newsom at his word and hold him to his own standards. Refine your gas in California instead of putting it on ships from the other side of the continent, with each ship having to travel 8,000 nautical miles round trip. It's completely insane.
Well, there are 2 parts to this that I'd comment on. One, it's the usual left-wing abuse of major industry, where Gavin and all of his ilk will say, we don't need these guys here, they suck, they're destroying the planet, we want them gone, we're going to sue them out of existence if they operate in our state, and we hate them, go away. And then as soon as the companies are like, all right, fine, we'll leave, I guess we can't afford to work here anymore, the same people will sue them for leaving and we'll be all upset with them for trying to escape. It's an abusive situation. It's kind of remarkable to watch. But also, once again, this is just outsourcing your pollution. So pollution. We don't believe that carbon dioxide is pollution on this show, but you are outsourcing your emissions to China, to India, to other countries. It's the same thing as when California has chased other major industries out of their state and to international sources. It's I don't know. There's if climate change is caused by carbon dioxide emissions and there's no net decrease globally in carbon dioxide emissions from what they're doing, then what are they doing other than virtue signaling? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They may even be making it worse, as you indicated. Shipping is not free. They're not using sailboats to do it. And even if they were, everything that you need in order to construct a sailboat comes from oil and gas at this point in time. It's I don't know. California is completely out of control.
Yeah, you could ship all that oil much more easily, safely, and with less carbon emissions if you did it through pipelines to the refineries. Pipelines that exist, by the way. That's how they've been getting their oil, that and tanker, trains. And the funny thing is, we have this story. At the same time, California's actively asking these refineries that they're shutting down, that are shutting down due to climate regulations at a cost to the refiners. They're now begging them to stay open despite the climate rules forcing them to close. They've actively gone out and said, please stay open. What can we do to get you to stay open? Well, the answer is get rid of your climate rules and let us operate. I don't know if Gavin Newsom will ever be president, but if he is, it reminds me of when I was young. One of the bands, my favorite bands in my youth, was the Psychedelic Furs. They had a song called President Gas. Well, he would be President Gas Bag or President Gas Price, because that's what he is.
Yeah. I mean,
go
ahead, Anika.
Can I just jump in quickly? This topic, it saddens me because it's exactly what's happening here in the UK. In the last few years, we've gone from 19 oil refineries to 4. And I figured out that the reason this is happening is because these climate alarmist extremists, they're fanatical about this zero balance, this zero number on their carbon ledger. They're obsessed with getting this net zero number on their ledger sheet. So regardless of whether, 10 times more carbon emissions are created in the world somewhere, as long as it doesn't reflect on them in their country or constituency, then they don't care. It's a bit ironic and a bit sad.
Well, some people in our notes have commented that Newsom is making, is lying with Ed Miliband over there in England, that they have similar goals and similar dreams. And that tells you, as far as I'm concerned, that should tell you all you need to know about whether he needs to be the president of the United States, because no offense to you, Miliband is called Mad Miliband for a reason.
I take absolutely no offense from that whatsoever.
Didn't think so.
He's completely out of his mind. Most of the people in government here currently are. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, by the way, you guys have hinted at it, but I actually looked this up. So about what the carbon footprint would be and in this scheme. And it's this idea of just kind of offshoring your carbon footprint, and as if that really matters. And in fact, makes things a lot worse. So just a one-way trip from the Bahamas to Long Beach, California, which is where all the imports come in. They have to go through the Panama Canal. That is 4,000 miles one way. That expels about according to Grok, I asked them to do the calculations for me, 6,000 tons of CO2 emissions. And if you have a 20-mile commute to work every day in your car, it would take you until the year 3051, taking those daily commutes 5 days a week, every day, to match that one trip in the tanker. That's 1,625 years from now. But California is green, and it's madness. And these things need to be pointed out. And that's the whole net zero thing, is a scheme to offshore things as well, because it's not going to happen.
Jim, you're such an optimist. You say that these will go through the Panama Canal. Large oil tankers can't go through the Panama Canal. They have to go around the tip of South America to come up to California. Add thousands and thousands of miles to that round trip. Small or mid-sized oil tankers, which they're getting rid of, don't fit through the Panama Canal.
Well, great. Then it won't be till the year like 4,212 then. No worries. All right. Let's move on to our next item here. Nature doesn't lie, right? Well, we'll see. This comes from the Japan Times. I believe Sterling put this for us to look at this week as well, suggested it. Headline, Japan's godless lake warns of creeping climate change. And forgive me for the length here. It's going to take a little bit of setup here, but it's going to be worth it. Settle in. Story begins. The priest and worshipers gathered before dawn, hoping that climate change had not robbed them of the chance to experience an increasingly rare communion with the sacred. The few dozen men, mostly in their 60s, were headed to Lake Suwa in Nagano Prefecture in search of a phenomenon called God's Crossing that has gone from reliable to elusive in recent decades. Known as omiwatari, it occurs when a crack opens up in the frozen lake surface, allowing shards of thinner ice to break through and form a ridge where local deities are believed to cross. For centuries, the priests of the nearby Yatsuguri Shrine has led an annual watch for the crossing, contributing to a unique record of a changing climate. This year's watch began on January 5th, with Kiyoshi Miyasaka, a priest in the Shinto religion, leading the flock. One man carried a worn flag, another a giant axe. All wore jackets bearing the shrine's crest. They set out with hope, despite a 7-year stretch in which God's crossing had not appeared once. Quote, "This is the start of the decisive 30 days, Miyasaka told them. But as they neared the water, dark and choppy in the pre-dawn light, Miyasaka's staple smile disappeared. How pitiful, he said, lowering a thermometer into the water. Miyasaka's predecessors noted when the entire lake surface froze and when the Omiwatari appeared. More recently, priests have added temperature readings and ice thickness. Consecutive records date all the way back to 1443 through the shrine, though the shrine's priests only took over the job in 1683. Quote, "The Chronicle shows data taken at a single location over hundreds of years, and thanks to it, we can now see what the climate was like centuries ago. We find no other meteorological archive comparable to it," she said. "Global researchers who study climate history see it as a very valuable set of observation records," unquote. God's crossing has not appeared since 2018, an absence that both scientists and believers attribute to climate change. Quote, "We are seeing the signs of climate change in many places of the world, and Lake Suwa is no exception," Miyasaka said. "Nature doesn't lie." Well, I guess that settles it then, because it's been said at that holy lake there. So, Sterling, I'll start with you here. What do you make of this? Because I know there's a lot of so-called or quote unquote ancient but long-standing weather observation posts that go back centuries that we do tend to look at from time to time. So what do you make of this?
Well, I think this would certainly be longer standing record than anything, than any, you got proxy data beyond that. As far as temperature stations, they don't go back, I don't think, to the 16th or 14th century. To know what I think about this, I'd have to know what the record is, in the sense that, are you telling me that there's never before in the history of this lake been a period when God's bridge did not appear? They don't say that in the story. They say it hasn't happened since 2018, but they don't say there's been no comparable period in the past. So I wonder about that. But even if it were to be the case that there is no comparable period in the past, remember when they started recording this? During the little ice age that the Earth experienced. So you start recording in the depths of the little ice age. You go back to England 200 years ago and the Thames is freezing over. And if you start recording then, suddenly the Thames is, well, it's never freezing over anymore. Oh my God, must be climate change. And I guess it is climate change. It's a recovery from the little ice age when they first started recording this. It's unclear to me that solely CO2 emissions has anything to do with this happening. I'd like to look at the longer record, but even like I said, if you start recording during a particularly cold period that's unusual and it warms up, then the warming and the lack of ice formation isn't that unusual. My suspicion is this has waxed and waned over the centuries. Maybe it was more consistent in the early part of the Little Ice Age, but has become less consistent since we came out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we've mentioned it much on this show, but I know that there are several temperature stations in the UK that go back a couple hundred years, and they don't show the kind of spikes that the models show, and that the temperature has been well within natural variation. So I'm surprised, and not surprised, that a counterexample like that was not included in this as well.
Well, I would also ask.
You're muted, Anthony. You're talking. You're our temperature station guy. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I had muted myself because I've had a coughing fit this morning. These older stations, you're right, they don't show these spikes. And the article itself, they don't want to have any other kind of constraining problems or whatever, it's talking about real facts. That's a problem that we see in the media time and again, which is why we have climaterealism.com, where we go in and debunk the media on a regular basis. For example, I just did an interview with the Toledo Blade newspaper in Toledo, Ohio, asking about, shorter winters. And the data that they used from Climate Central, which is an advocate group, went out and looked at all of these urban stations, airport stations and so forth, and said, well, based on the temperature, winters are getting shorter. Well, duh, UHI. And they paid no attention to that whatsoever because that's inconvenient. That doesn't fit the narrative. And so when I pointed it out to the Toledo Blade reporter, he actually put it in because, it makes sense. If you have temperatures that are warming in cities alone, and the cities are growing, getting bigger, more concrete, more asphalt, more jet exhaust, all of that stuff, you're going to see warmer temperatures, and you're going to see what appears to be shorter winters based on those temperatures. But that doesn't mean climate change is causing it.
I don't want to be sacrilegious, but does God really need? Can he not form a bridge on his own if he wants to form that bridge, or not need a bridge at all? Perhaps.
Water is traditionally very important in religion. So I understand the fascination of seeing if particular climate events to do with the water might occur and create traditions, etc., like the frost fairs in England. But, there are the 1500-year Dansgaard Oshka events, which are the warming and cooling cycles. So, as you said, Sterling, when they took these first records, the Earth was in the Little Ice Age. And a lot of people don't realize that actually this was global in nature. They've studied many proxies, bee, pollen, fossil, all of the proxies. And basically, this was a worldwide thing. So, a lot of people think that this only happened in Europe. But so they would be coming out of that into warmer weather, and eventually it will descend back and they will get the bridge again.
And we'll all be suffering because the Ice Age came back and crops start failing. And
well, we're hoping for some technological advances that will save us, I think.
Build the dome. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, just interesting. It's like, another thing we covered, we called the crazy climate news because, literally anything can be tied to, tragically to human caused climate change. So even that. So, all right. Go ahead. Sorry.
I said, it's as I've said before, Jim, it's like, it's a climate hypochondria.
Absolutely. Yep. That's a great description of it for sure.
Mm.
All right. Our fourth one here is I want to talk a little bit about climate. Well, supposedly the fight against climate disinformation in Europe. And we were hoping to have Anika on a few weeks ago when I saw this tweet that she had to talk about this. And now we're so lucky enough to have her here with us today to talk about this. Andy, it's in the show notes. You might be able to bring the tweet up for us. In fact, I'll grab it on my own over here. So, looking at this tweet, you had said this was back on February 2nd, I believe. You said, news, EU endorses landmark declaration on information integrity on climate change. And you says this matters because now it's only a matter of time until denying man-made climate change becomes illegal. And here, I'll read from their own statement here, and then you can tell us more about it, Anika. This comes from the EU. There's a lot of talk about climate change, but some of it is designed to mislead. Climate disinformation is the intentional spread of false or misleading information about climate change and climate action. This show is very, very guilty of that. It can take many forms, from denial and conspiracy theories to softer, more insidious arguments that seek to muddy the waters. Those who push climate disinformation deliberately finance, create, or spread content to destruct climate action. For example, they try to cast doubt on the scientific consensus or sway people's opinions in order to reduce pressure to regulate pollution or prepare for the impacts of climate change. And this comes from the European Commission's Directorate General for Climate Action. So, Anika, we are all on this show very, very guilty of everything the EU is now, as you say, might even turn into a actual crime one day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it's going. You know, the idea that you criticizing or disputing the climate alarmist narrative might be illegal, I mean, that's very worrying. Here in the UK, people are getting locked up every day, multiple people, for just writing their opinions online because it doesn't fit the signed off narrative that the government wants people to think. So in effect, the EU have shown their true colors here. The EU seem to be narcissists. The technique that they're deploying here is known as psychological projection, and it's where someone attributes their own thoughts, motives, or behaviors to another person. So firstly, they're denying their behavior, lying about the origin of climatic change. They're attacking us, the realists, for raising it. And then through this climate facts matter campaign, they flip the script so that they become the victim and we become the aggressor. And the scariest part is that I know this is just a precursor to making it illegal. To have podcasts like this, to post about it online, they're, you know, throwing people in prison all over the place. And, you know, if you take a look at the wording, it's just missing a few words on the end. So I will add those words now. Those who push climate disinformation, deliberately finance, create, or spread content to obstruct climate action, for example, try to cast doubt on the scientific consensus or sway people's opinions in order to reduce pressure to regulate pollution or prepare for the impacts of climate change, will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And those are just the missing words. Whether it's coming in 6 months or 6 weeks, I don't know. Now, the reason they're doing this, that's the most important factor. They're doing it from the fear that they're finally being exposed, which they are. And they're doing this because people are waking up and therefore their policies are no longer being put through to filter trillions of dollars to them. They're seeing a substantial financial loss. And I think this is why we've seen this.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen this in the United States. I mean, it was this way until, frankly, Elon Musk bought Twitter, but the government was conspiring with social media companies to silence anyone who questioned the dogma of catastrophic human-caused climate change, who presented data and facts that did not meet the narrative, were suppressed. This channel has been suppressed like crazy. The Heartland Institute's YouTube channel, because of this show and the positions that we've taken for a long time on it. They're not arresting people in the United States for this just yet.
Yet.
Yeah, I call America the free world. I think you guys are going to be a lot safer than we will over here. But the fact that, you know, the show was demonetized, I mean, that's completely out of order.
You know, it sounds to me, and I've been following what's going on in the UK on free speech, not on climate, not just on climate, but on a variety of other matters. You know, people being locked up for speaking about religion. It's 1984. And if you go to, you know, Jim, when he first started reading it, they said something about if they're doing this with the intention of misleading or something like that. I forget what the actual language was, but the word intention was there. Intention is important in criminal law. And I would just say, well, what if your intention is just having, you know, presenting data for others to consider? We used to call that education or debate. And does it have the intention to persuade? Yeah. To persuade them that, you know, this view, but not to say climate change doesn't occur. I've never disputed that. Now I will dispute whether there's evidence it's a disaster, but is my intention to mislead? No, my intention is to inform. And if all they're saying is, if you inform people about something we don't like, your intention is necessarily to mislead, well, then we've really gone down the 1984 rabbit hole.
Yeah, you know, I'm probably on the hit list as far as people who are breaking the law with what's up with that, or, you know, the law as they see it. You know, because we've been doing this for 20 years. We've been pointing out facts instead of disinformation. Of course, they call it disinformation because it doesn't align with their worldview. And, you know, I've had calls from people saying that, you know, I should be jailed. Some people had said I should be you know, killed. I mean, you know, there's all these whack jobs out there that think that we are preventing the planet from healing. Well, that's not the case at all. The planet's doing just fine. We've got more greening going on. We've got more productivity going on with our populations. Everything is great. We live in a golden age of success as far as the planet is concerned. And the planet's actually doing better itself because of the greening and so forth. Yes, there is some pollution out there. Yes, there's some problems with that. But even so, we've made great strides since the Environmental Protection Agency was put together in the early 1970s by Nixon, I will point out, a Republican. And, you know, we've got cleaner air, cleaner water, you know, cleaner everything. But it's never enough for these people. And if you push back against them, they call you a climate denier. They call you an earth wrecker. They call you a planet murderer. All these crazy ideas. So, yeah, I could probably end up getting arrested if I go into the EU, but I have no plans to visit the EU anytime soon.
All right. Well, I guess you're not coming. If we go back out there to counter the Davos conference, I guess you can't come. We'll pipe you in this way. But I just want to point out that as Andy, our producer extraordinaire in the background, noted in our little private chat, that What's Up With That was the most cited skeptical website globally on Reddit from 2014 to 2022. So Anthony Watts has even a bigger target on his forehead from the people in the EU when it comes to pushing skepticism. But as everybody knows,
I think maybe I should change my. I think maybe I should change my subtitle here from at What's Up With That to Outlaw. How's that?
There you go. Global outlaw, Anthony Watts. Yeah. Because everybody knows when you're winning the argument and you have the facts and the moral high ground on your side, the first thing you do is shut up and jail everyone who opposes you. So everybody knows that. You know,
the most stupid, you know, in my opinion, the most stupid thing about the whole climate debate, all of this, is the idea that we're damaging the earth. The earth's not a living being. And regardless of what we do, the earth will abide. There was a great science fiction book called Earth Abides. It was here before man. It will be here after mankind, or humankind, not to be gender biased. But you know, the problem with all of this is that the people who are worried about climate change, they have what I call a time slice view of the world. They've got an ideal for this is the perfect environment for the earth. Why this? Why not the middle of an ice age? The earth doesn't care whether it's an ice age or hotter than today. Did the earth complain when the dinosaurs roamed the earth? You know, they're picking the point of view that they think is best from, once again, their God's eye point of view. They know better. They say they follow nature. Well, okay, nature goes all over the place if that's what you really want. From a human fecundity and flourishing point of view, higher CO2 is better for us than lower CO2.
Yeah,
but they've got somehow they picked, I don't know, the 1870s or the 1700s or the 1920s as the ideal climate, global average temperature. And it's like, where did they come with that? You know, why that and not some other? It was made up.
Well, that was actually a measurement to distinguish different planets' temperatures from one another. There was only ever a global average so that they could say the Earth is 30 degrees, Venus is 400 degrees, etc. It was only ever meant to be used to compare planets against one another.
There you go.
So it's useless.
Great. Well, all right. Well, I want to move on. I want to talk a little about, you know, the main topic on this thing in the thumbnail is about kind of a realism, a journey to climate realism. And Anika, you are joining us as a speaker at Heartland's Climate Conference, April 8th and 9th in Washington, D.C. Be sure to get your tickets now. Go to heartland.org. And as I mentioned earlier, you were with us in Switzerland for the Heartland Institute's World Prosperity Forum, and your speech was very popular with viewers. In fact, people have mentioned it in the chat today. So I wonder if you could talk to our audience a little bit about, for lack of a better term, climate realism journey. Where did you start? What did you think about the climate and the science at the time, and why? And how did you end up here with us today, having fun on the Climate Realism Show?
Well, so I had been bombarded with global warming propaganda my whole life. I grew up in the most isolated city in the world, Perth, and was very sheltered. And after convincing myself that I could find a solution to the world's problems, I decided to embark on a 4-year climate studies degree at the University of Western Australia. But what I was taught wasn't the cutting edge science I was assured I was learning. It was actually just a climate scientist training camp. They were training me to be one of the 97% of scientists that agree on the science of climate change. There were no textbooks. We just read journal articles that comfortably fit the climate alarmist narrative. And therefore, our lectures were the main source of information. So my lecture notes felt like the Bible. And most of the time, it didn't feel like an open scientific debate. It felt almost religious in tone. So in that spirit, I thought I'd have a bit of fun and turn what I was taught in university into the 10 climate commandments. Are you ready?
Yes, let's go.
Thou shalt declare that CO2 shall heat the globe until the oceans boil over. Thou shalt speak of consensus and not of uncertainty. Thou shalt speak not of the sun, sea, nor volcano, for man alone holdeth the thermostat of the earth. Thou shalt measure all storms against the year 1850. Thou shalt erase the medieval warmth and the little ice age, for they trouble thy narrative. Blessed are the offsetters, for they shall inherit moral superiority. Thou shalt not question the model projections. Thou shalt repent of thy carbon footprint. Thou shalt sacrifice thy gas boiler for the greater good, and thou shalt treat each storm as prophecy fulfilled. So that is basically what I learned. And it was like a cult. Now I see that. But, I believed this stuff. Like I said in Zurich, I thoroughly respected my professors, the institution of university itself. I worked really hard in school to get into the best university in my state. And I really thought I was learning the cutting edge stuff in the world. So going back through my lecture notes, and when I saw things like carbon dioxide will starve trees, now that sounds so obvious, right? For anyone listening, they're probably like, how did you believe that? But it was at the higher level of carbon dioxide that trees would starve. When you're brainwashed, there's just no logic. So, for one of our practical assessments, we were assigned roles in a mock conference of the parties. Some of us were fossil fuel nations, some were small island states, some were negotiators, some press, and it normalized the climate problem as something that needed to be negotiated, something that was political in nature. And this was the tragedy, that they were never training scientists. They were simply training socialists to enact their agenda. And so the science, it didn't add up. I remember thinking, in climate modeling, energy in doesn't really equal energy out in the real world. And I remember emailing one of my professors, because I did things like hydrology and environmental systems engineering as well. And so when I was doing all of the redox reactions and all of that, I could see from the maths that there was loads of unaccounted energy in the system, loads of unaccounted for energy. And so I emailed one of my professors and I said, look, actually, I know this is what we're doing, but I think actually energy in doesn't equal energy out. And I just never got a reply. And by that point, I was getting pretty fed up because things weren't adding up. And yeah, it was a journey, you know, to realize that the thing I dedicated my life to was not real. Yeah, so now that I know the truth, I'm kind of like their worst nightmare. And ever since my speech came online in Zurich, I've had a plethora of haters come after me because they are afraid that one of their climate scientists, it's like I've escaped a concentration camp and I'm telling everyone what they're doing to people. Like that is the reality for them. One of their brainwashed has become unbrainwashed. And that's a dangerous place for them to be in. And that's the story.
That's a great story. And it's you know, you had some fun with the 10 commandments of climate alarmism, but it's apropos because it is a religious, I mean, maybe not everybody on this show agrees with me, but it's a cult. I call it the climate cult, and because it is impervious. The people that are in this climate cult are impervious to reason and data and science. Not all of them, obviously. You're not one of those, and there are many others who have been pulled out of the cult. But it is extremely difficult because there's two factors at play. If you allow data and observation and logic to penetrate your belief system, that's a lot. It's a belief system, and so it's very difficult emotionally and spiritually to pull away from it. I think our friend Tom Harris from Canada, who's another climate realist, former climate alarmist, and who, you know, one of the rare people that saw the data himself and decided and changed his mind because of that. He makes the point when I speak to him on occasion that, you know, you can't, if somebody reaches a position based on emotion, you can't get them out of it via logic. And if they, that you need to make an emotional appeal. Maybe that's not universally true, but it seems generally true.
I wrote a series of articles. I wrote started with writing for Human Events, and then I wrote for National Review, calling the climate change belief a religion and not science 18 years ago, because I just did an examination of what religion does and how science works, and I pointed out that the climate science wasn't working like science. They take model assumptions and model outputs as a matter of faith, and faith has a role in our lives. I'm a religious person myself, but faith and religion is not science. They satisfy different needs for human flourishing, and the main thing that got me was, in science, you make a theory, you set up a hypothesis, then you develop a theory to basically explain a phenomenon, and then you test it against reality. And if you claim that if humans put CO2 in the atmosphere, it causes warming, and warming causes more hurricanes, and more hurricanes aren't occurring, that should lead you to question not the data but the theory. Mm-hmm. If you do the same thing about tornadoes or wildfires, then none of those things are occurring. And pretty soon, as the data mounts, as your different prongs of predictions are disconfirmed, you should start saying, well, maybe we need a better explanation for the phenomenon that's going on than humans are causing CO2. Human CO2 is causing warming that's a catastrophe for the Earth. But they never question that. In fact, they can make diametrically opposed predictions for the same place. Right now, you can find newspaper articles that say the monsoon season is getting worse and the monsoon season is getting less severe, either of which are bad for the farming in monsoon prone areas because they depend on the monsoon rains. You can find that all over the earth. You can find predictions that just pick your climate catastrophe and they will say worse or better. The snow, just recently, snow's been we will find the end of snow New York Times ran 2 separate articles over the years called The End of Snow. Then they run articles saying, oh, climate change is causing more snow, and we can explain why. It's like, look, it can't cause both less snow and more snow in the same location in the same time period. It can't. That's called impossible. That's a religion. In religions, impossible things can happen. Not in science.
Man-caused climate change is the alpha and the omega. Don't you know that, Sterling?
Well, that's why I'm the Archbishop of Ranterbury. I'm the Archbishop of Realism.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot to mention my key thing about when I said all these people came after me. I forgot to mention that I know they are paid by the climate establishment to do that. Just like, in the 50s in America, you had misinformation officers going to people's houses and saying, look, I know that you think this, but we're experts, and actually it's not true. So I know that they're paid. I know they're just doing it as a job. So I'm actually not fussed by it.
Yeah, we just had a story on What's Up With That just yesterday, I believe it was, where there was $2 billion worth of money being sent from the EU, not the EU itself, but from Europe, to the United States to fund these kinds of outfits. $2 billion. And yet at the same time, the left accuses us of, taking big oil money. We've never gotten a freaking dime, not one dime. And, they are just simply telegraphing what they're doing themselves. It's pathetic. There's the article right there.
Al Gore, I don't often say Al Gore is right, but he made one claim, he was citing someone else, but it's something to the effect, it's hard to admit you're wrong about something when you're paid to believe something.
Mm.
Another example of this recently that I was kind of like pulling my hair out this morning looking at, article came out from Science Daily News, and it was a study from Queen Mary University of London that said that it's actually like now that they've looked at the data on, I guess, like invasive species or like species overturn in different niches, ecological niches. They used to say that climate change was going to cause this to happen rapidly, and it was a bad thing because, species that were used to being in these environments are being pushed out. And so new species are coming in, and it's a bad thing. Well, now they've come out with this study that says actually what they're calling now like ecosystem turnover is slowing down, and that's a bad thing because it means that they aren't adapting fast enough, and they aren't, the fact that invasive species aren't coming in is a bad thing because it means that it's just collapsing. And it's like, you don't get to have it both ways. I'm sorry, you've run out of.
They have no shame.
Everything can't be a bad thing. It's not possible. I just don't believe you anymore.
Everything is a bad thing, Linnea.
Oh, come on, Linnea, get with the program. Climate change causes everything bad that changes.
Yeah, all change is always bad. That's what I've learned from the news.
Well, even if you want to paint, we can wrap it up here, but even if you want to paint us as the doubting Thomases of the climate cult, at least in the Bible, Thomas was convinced of the resurrection by seeing proof, and he was convinced of it. And the trouble with the climate cultists is that there is no proof. They can't. All of their models are false. They are not. If we were presented, and we mean this, we say this on the show a lot. If you present us with evidence that we are wrong, that our views on climate and energy use and is wrong, if you bring the evidence that will convince us, because our positions are not emotionally based or spiritually based. They are logic and data based. And if you can show us the data that proves us wrong, bring it on. And again, Bill Nye, any of you alarmists, we know that some of you, I'm sorry to say alarmists, but you're just going to have to deal with that. After being called a denier for the last 20 years, you're going to have to put up with alarmists. I'm sorry. But if you want to come to our climate conference and challenge the positions that the scientists that we're going to have there are presenting, you're welcome to it. This is not invitation only. Buy your tickets today. Go to heartland.org. It is filling up, so you're going to want to be there.
Sorry, Jim, did you want to continue?
No. I just wanted to get into, I have no segue None. So I'm just going to talk about our sponsor for this program that helps make it happen.
Boo.
And that I know, boo. Linnea's booing.
Well,
I
let me
had
say
one and then I lost it. So, oh well. So with a horrible segue, I can still tell you about the sponsor of this program, which is Advisor Metals. If you listen to a lot of conservative shows like this one, and I do, you hear tons of pitches for buying gold and silver and other precious metals. And there are a lot of companies out there asking for your business. But we want to tell you why you should trust the sponsor of this program, and that's Advisor Metals. And it's because of the man who runs the company, Ira Brashatsky. Ira is the managing member of Advisor Metals, and he doesn't employ high-pressure tactics or deceptive marketing ploys like many of the companies in big gold. He also doesn't deal in so-called rare coins, which are probably not rare and you're not interested in. When you buy gold and other precious metals from Advisor Metals, you're dealing in quality bullion, and that is so much better when it comes time to liquidate your very valuable physical asset. And when you buy from Advisor Metals, you will have your investment sent discreetly and directly to your own home. Also want to mention that Ira is advertising on this program because he believes in this program and in the Heartland Institute. He is an America First patriot. He doesn't donate to Democrats. He refuses to work with proxies of the Chinese Communist Party, and he, like us, abhor the machinations and schemes of the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. That is why we are so proud to have Advisor Metals as a sponsor. So if you want to diversify your portfolio, if you want to back up your IRA with real physical bullion of precious metals, go to climaterealismshow.com/metals. You can leave your information there, and Ira will make the whole process very easy for you. climaterealismshow.com/metals, and be sure to tell them who sent you, because that helps this show while you're helping your financial future. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
If I could just say, I found the quote. It was Upton Sinclair that Gore was quoting, and it says, "It's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on not understanding it." That applies so well to all the academics working on climate change and all the bureaucrats staffing agencies who are raking in and who have raked in billions of dollars on climate change. Meteorology, climatology, meteorology, those departments have raked in more money in the past 15 years on the climate scam than they cumulatively received throughout history before that.
What?
If it goes away, their funding does. If we start devoting funding to actually curing something like hunger in the developing countries or cancer, they're out of work.
Well, we've said it on this program a million times. I mean, Greenpeace spends more on catering than the entire budget, the annual budget of the Heartland Institute and our allied organizations. And it's just the whole idea that we're swimming in fossil fuel money. You know, if it was only so. It is totally not so. We say what we say on principle, and we are supported by other men and women of principle who think the message is important. That's it. We don't take money from NGOs. We don't take money from government. It's always, look, we have another program called In the Tank from the Heartland Institute. We talk about lots of things, not just climate. And man, leftism is just projection all the way down. Everything they accuse their opponents of doing is exactly what's actually happening in their own shops. So don't get me started on that. What we should get started on, though, is the Q&A, everyone's favorite part of the show. So Linnea, take it away.
All right. I want to bring up this comment that Climate Bell, frequent viewer of ours, had. It wasn't a question, but I thought it was good to read. He said, "There are honest but careless climate scientists who have assumed someone did their computations properly and parrot their narrative without checking, but others who knowingly support dishonest science." Yeah, and that's the thing that's frustrating. Across the board in this area, there are scientists who are earnest, but maybe a little bit lazy, or at least a little bit too trusting in their colleagues, and assume that people are doing checking when they're not doing checking. That's a big problem in peer review right now in every area of science, is people not actually checking the math the way that they're supposed to when these papers are going up. So yeah, that is a difficult situation. All right, so Spiralarch, I'm not sure how to pronounce this. Spiralarch.
Spiral Arch.
Spiral Arch,
Yes.
is I have not seen you in the chat before, I don't think so. Welcome, but I'm going to address this question here. All right, Anthony, this is for you.
Well,
What
hold on a second. I'm doing some research, so why don't we
Okay,
defer
okay.
that question and come back to it, okay?
Sure.
There,
All right.
there was a
I'll-
book published. There was a book published a couple of years ago called Black Carbon, and it argues that a lot of the change in albedo and warming is due to soot that has fallen upon white surfaces, causing the melting and causing heating.
Sterling, you gotta let me address the question first so that our audio only listeners know what we're talking about. All right. So this question was what
Okay, I
percentage-
got an answer.
Okay, what percentage of the darkening of Earth's albedo or reflectivity to space is due
Okay,
to the
this
proliferation of
actually-
near black solar panels?
This
have to let-
actually surprised me.
You got to let her finish. She just told me that. You need to listen to.
All
Okay.
right.
Sorry. So I had a calculation done,
Okay.
and this is based on 2024 data. So this is using capacity and acres per megawatt to help calculate this. The Earth's land surface area is about 149 million square kilometers. Solar panels occupy roughly 1/20th of 1%, or about 0.04 to 0.05% of the Earth's surface is covered by solar panels. So that's not a lot, and therefore probably is not a factor in any kind of changes in the climate. We see changes that are larger than that based on seasons.
Well, you might see local changes, right? If we talk about the urban heat island effect, well, local albedo might change. The heating might be caused, some of it might be caused by solar panels, but not, global average temperature doesn't seem like probably largely affected.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Okay, Sterling, this one's for you.
Okay.
From Wheelman, he says iron fillings are a good thing, or iron filings are a good thing to spread in the ocean.
Yeah, this is an old
I think she
old
said the
idea
question was
that
for me,
gained some
Anthony.
traction.
I think she said the question was for me, Anthony.
All right.
I did.
I think that's
You
what
guys
she
can
just
disagree. Go
said.
ahead first.
Yes.
Okay.
So we don't have a shortage of iron filings. We do milling. We have a lot of it. There are places in the ocean that are called dead spots because they don't have minerals for life to congregate. They don't start the phytoplanktons and the planktons, the whole food chain. And they did experiments where they could dump iron filings in the ocean. It doesn't cost a lot. The filings are considered waste anyway. And they started the food chain, and fisheries improved. And they were worried about carbon dioxide. Turns out it takes carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. Now I'm not worried about the latter, but if we can create more places where sea life thrives, that doesn't seem to be a bad thing to me. I'm not one of those that says we don't tamper with Mother Earth. Every time we log, we tamper with Mother Earth. Every time we build a new subdivision, we tamper with Mother Earth. I don't see this, but just one more thing that we might do to make life a little bit better.
Yep. It's the same reason you not sinking logs in the Arctic or Antarctic, but sinking logs in a pond to make fish habitat is a fun thing to do as well. Not worrying about carbon dioxide on that one. All right. So Ma Mason says the graph by Happer-Linson to show how concentrations go up, how when concentrations go up, the greenhouse effect does not go up linearly. Is there a way that we can describe how this works so someone can visualize it?
I mean, I would just say that because CO2 doesn't really have a huge relationship with temperature. I mean, that's reality, really, isn't it? Not a direct relationship, not one we've seen produced again and again. There's so many variables that go into it. So, yeah, Linnea, do you think that there would be an equation, as it were?
Well, of course, yeah, there's an equation. That's what they're referring to here is the logarithmic, basically, relationship between temperature and carbon dioxide. Anthony has a good model for this. I also have a model for this. There's a whole bunch of different like examples that you can give. I can let Anthony tell his, I think the soup model, and I can also tell my window pane model. But Anthony?
Yeah, well, the soup model is basically you go to a restaurant, you order a bowl of soup, you taste it. Yeah, it's kind of bland. I need some salt. You put some salt in the soup. Taste it again. It's a little better, but I need some more salt, I think. So you salt it yet again, and you accidentally put too much salt in it. Now you taste it, and it's too salty. Well, no matter how much more salt you would add to it at that point, it's still going to taste too salty. Your taste buds' response to the salt is saturated. And that's how it works with the atmosphere. As you get more and more CO2, at some point you reach a saturation point, and no matter how much more you add, the response is the same. And so that's my model on it, or my analogy.
Yeah, and I had a professor in college when I was taking remote sensing that explained it like if you have a window pane and you put strips of masking tape, that semi-transparent, kind of like painter's tape on it. The strips for carbon dioxide only go in a certain location, only block certain wavelengths of the light coming in through the window. And every time you add more, you're just putting the same strips on top of where strips already are. And there is a little bit of a blurring effect over time, but at a certain point, they're not blocking any more light, no matter how many more you add. So that my example works a lot better if you can like actually see the see the window pane example that our professor gave, but that's the one that I have. So there's a couple different examples. Yeah, and Above Us Only Sky mentions that Will Happer has a red paint on the barn example as well. There's tons and tons. So alrighty. And LT Oracle Truth also says, I've been getting a lot of articles in my newsfeed about orcas and Greenland warning of climate catastrophe. What's up with that?
Oh.
I have not seen an orca thing.
I haven't seen one either.
I've seen it, and basically it's just another unverified claim. Climate change is killing the orcas, making the orcas get less food. Pick any argument you want. It's just like the polar bears. The polar bears, they can't really exploit that too much anymore. So now they're going after the orcas.
Yeah, it's harder to count a whale, I guess.
Except I've seen how the orcas play with their food, and I have a lot less sympathy for them than it's hard for me to generate tears after seeing an orca toss around a seal so his kid can learn how to hunt.
Yeah. Albert says, question, will you please talk a bit about the BBC lying about the state of the Great Barrier Reef? I did see this one. It was pretty remarkable recent article. The BBC said that the Great Barrier Reef has suffered the worst like coral die-off in all of history or whatever. And the way that they framed it made it sound like the Great Barrier Reef is just gone. It's just devastated. And then you look at the chart, there's available current data on coral extent, and it's still at like all-time highs. So it's just nonsense.
Yeah, it is. But, it just goes along with their narrative of we're only going to report what's changed and what's bad. We're not going to report anything that's good, like recovery, because that would be against the narrative.
Well, it's also confusing bleaching events with death. They've had some large bleaching events. They've had multiple years of large bleaching deaths bleaching events in the past decade. But the vast majority of the coral recovered, and other parts of the coral continue to grow. So it keeps setting records despite these bleaching events, which aren't death.
Right. And the bleaching events are actually part of the natural cycle for coral. Coral has a symbiotic relationship with these, little tiny algae organisms and so forth. And, they're basically, renting space in the coral. The coral is an algae high rise, so to speak. Right. So every once in a while, the coral says, hey, you know what? I'm cleaning house. Get out. And then once it does that, then the spaces are available again, and they come right back in. It does not mean death, just as Sterling said.
Mm-hmm. And a little interesting note there is that corals also bleach in cool water, not just warmer water.
Yeah.
They bleach in response to all sorts of things. They bleach in response to all sorts of things. Silt, farm runoff, all sorts of things can make it harder for them to colonies to expand.
Yep. All right. We have a great question here for Anika from our friend M. Johansson, who says, is Anika working with any of the climate realism groups here in the EU SSR? That would be the Global Warming Policy Foundation or Clintel, etc.
I hope to. Do get in touch if you're with one of these organizations. I would love to be affiliated with all climate realism groups. Yes. That's all I can say, really.
I advocate Lois reach out to her, and she works with Heartland UK Europe.
I would really like that, yeah.
All right. I have another question for Anika. This one from Above Us Only Sky, who says, would you consider consulting with any political parties in the UK on climate and energy issues in future elections?
I think I'll kind of answer that question in reverse. So I've been sort of in talks a little bit. Basically, the only political party here in the UK that is aligned with my views on energy, excluding the new political party that came out a couple of days ago, is Reform. So they're the only party that would want to do things like leave the Climate Change Act, leave United Nations infrastructure, just like America has. So yeah, I actually wrote a paper, a net zero paper, which I've shown to the party, and we've been talking about it and discussing it. So yeah, that's actually what I always wanted to do in university, was be an advisor, an energy advisor to the Minister for Climate Change. So I definitely want to, you know, work on energy policy in this country. I mean, it's in a dire state at the moment. And as we all know here on the show, the solution is really obvious as to the optimal kind of energy strategy. So definitely, yes, I am. And watch that space, I guess.
You're muted, Linnea.
Ah, man, it got me.
She
You
pulled
pulled
a
a gem. You did
Pulled
it.
the gym today. Okay, so here's a kind of a little bit of a sarcastic question from Minnesota Beekeeper, who says, wasn't the Younger Dryas global warming caused by the Clovis culture driving SUVs and heating caves with evil fossil fuels?
Well, yeah, that's just about as good as any other crazy theory I've heard.
That's currently the reigning theory.
Thank you very much.
They used to do their climate models on abacuses, and they were, and the math added up.
Yeah, they push bones around on the cave floor. Stephen Lindsay says, question to Anika, how many times once told by your professor did you think, well, that doesn't add up? Were the contradictions overwhelming? And same to everyone else.
Only towards the end did I kind of realize this isn't adding up. And, you know, I wasn't on campus as much because I was working on my dissertation. So, you know, but when I didn't hear back from the emails and I got kind of frosty reception from my professors about a few questions, I mean, when you're in that power dynamic, you're not kind of like brave enough as like a 20-year-old to be like, I must be right and they're wrong. I thought, oh God, that must have just sounded really stupid. Oh God, I'm just not worth even replying to. So, you know, it wasn't until I very much was out of the system and grew up a bit that I could reframe the narrative.
Alrighty. Awesome. Okay. So another question for Anika from our good friend Stan Goldenberg, who says, what are the current hopes, so make a forecast, so to speak, for the UK to come back to their senses regarding man-made climate change?
Well, I mean, I was asked this recently, you know, do I think that the next political party of the day should come out and say, hey, look, we don't believe in this man-made climate change theory? And my response was that I don't actually think it's necessary to say something so controversial, because obviously the media would have a field day with it and all of that. But I think actions speak so much louder than words. So I think just leaving the climate change infrastructure would say everything that needs to be said. And my forecasts are that we do exactly that. We repeal the Climate Change Act, scrap net zero and all of that other nonsense to take back our economy. You know, at the moment, there's these crazy taxes, people trying to drill oil in the North Sea, which has just become illegal. And we have the highest quality crude gas here in the world. And we're not allowed to drill it. And companies that are here at the moment drilling it, they're taxed 78 cents on the dollar. So it is simply not profitable. And this is exactly what's been happening with oil refineries. They've had to shut down because it's too expensive. So yeah, I've come to my senses. Lots of people in the country have come to their senses. It's just, when will we get into parliament so we can make those changes?
Would it help to just shift the conversation? You said just start taking actions. Shift the conversation to what they've done here, which is affordability. Look, do you want to keep heating your home? We recognize, I am now, whatever party you want me to be, I am now recognizing that we have an affordability crisis, and here's the solution. Get rid of things that are making energy more costly, that are restricting access to energy. They just happen to be the climate policies that, by the way, haven't stopped temperatures or CO2 emissions from rising at all. But we're going to focus on affordability. Let Miliband and his ilk talk about climate change.
Yeah, and this is the argument that is being pushed, you know, is the economic argument. It's completely making the country poor. It's making our bills the highest in the developed world. Commercial energy prices here are the highest in the developed world. But even so, you know, the left still say, well, there's so much money in green energy and actually our bills are going to be cheaper one day. So they just say the exact same thing we're saying. It's beyond. But people are definitely feeling it in their pockets, big time.
Absolutely. All right, so we're almost out of time here, but I'm going to get us this question, which I think is quite good, from Above Us Only Sky. This is a question for the whole panel, so we'll go around to everybody. But when did you each have your light bulb moment, if you did have a light bulb moment, that the climate change narrative did not match reality?
I'll go first. My moment came when I met the former state climatologist of California, James Goodridge, and he started showing me some of his work. And his work was all data-driven work, but he also introduced me to some of the weather stations that he had found in California, where one, for example, at the Mount Hamilton Observatory, you know, where they've got telescopes and scientists running around like, you know, everywhere, they had the temperature shelter right next to an incinerator. And so it's like, what? Really? And then he showed me another example of like that. And he says there's bunches of these all over the state. And that's when I started looking into it. And that's what got me really going, looking into these, the way these temperature stations were placed and how they'd been compromised. And once I saw the magnitude of this problem, I realized the temperature record can't possibly be correct. That was my light bulb moment.
I'm not sure I had a light bulb moment. I came at it as a skeptic from the start. I think that's the position you start with any new theory. They had a novel theory. They predicted lots of things, and I said, let's see how it works out. Let's see how the theory plays out in reality. I will be skeptical until I'm convinced, and I've just never been convinced.
That's a really good question. I think for me, it was when I saw the ice core data and I saw that, you know, the temperature had been higher at different times in history and that it was a kind of predictable cycle. That's when I realized.
Jim?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I mentioned this, I think, a couple shows ago. I was a journalist at the Pitt News, the University of Pittsburgh student newspaper back in the early 90s. Al Gore was sending out free copies of his book, Earth in the Balance. And I started flipping through that. And even though I'd only taken a few science courses, I was training to be a writer after all. I thought he was full of shit right from the beginning. None of that really made sense to me. So my light bulb has been screwed in the top of my head from the beginning.
I would like to amend my first answer to say that the real light bulb moment for me came when I got my $2 million check from Exxon Mobil. Joking, of course.
That's getting clipped. Oh boy.
Yep. Oh, they're gonna spread that all over the internet now.
You know what? Let them, because
Yeah.
it wouldn't matter. They would do it anyway. Every one of those people thinks that we are in the pocket of big oil when we've never gotten a dime. You know, it's crazy.
Yep. I think I've mentioned part of I was always pretty skeptical just because I'm not I grew up in a fairly conservative household and stuff with people who are fairly skeptical. But the moment where I realized that nobody knows what they're talking about was when I was in middle school. And this is petty, but this is where I became not just whatever, who cares? This stuff is everywhere. It's whatever, skeptic, and into actively researching mode, was when I was in 7th or 8th grade, and all of our classes were in this pilot program where they introduced climate into every single class that we were taking. So I was being just bombarded with it left and right. And then a author that I had been enjoying, their book series, one of their books had a climate narrative thing in it, and it was literally a young adult novel series, and it made no sense for them to just shoehorn it in there. And so I was already kind of tired of it. And then one of my teachers told me that polar bears were not good at swimming, and so that's why they were being killed, because the ice was melting and they were going to drown. And I thought, well, that's not true. I knew it because I was that kid that had the zoo books, and so I knew that wasn't true. So then I was oh, my teachers don't know what they're talking about either. So now I'm actively against this, not just passively against this. But yeah. All right, Jim, I'm handing it back to you. That is all the questions that we have.
All right, and that will do it for this episode of the Climate Realism Show. Before we go, I want to remind everybody, again, for I think the 3rd or 4th time, we are putting on the 16th International Conference on Climate Change in Washington, D.C., April 8th and 9th. The wonderful Anika Sweetland will be on the program. So you're going to, if you want to meet her and hear her speak in person, you're going to want to be there. And you can go to heartland.org. There's a feature there that you can click to go to the special climate conference webpage where you can get your tickets, see more of the list of speakers and the program that we have. We really hope to see every fan of this show there, or at least as many as we can fit into the ballroom. I want to thank our streaming partners, Junk Science, CFAC CO2 Coalition, Climate Depot, What's Up With That, and Heartland UK Europe. I want to thank our regular panelists, of course, Anthony Watts, Sterling Burnett, Linnea Lukin, and again, thank you so much, Anika Sweetland, for being on the show. I hope this is not going to be your last time. You'll be on here again because I think we all had a lot of fun. And I want to thank our audience, especially those of you in the chat that watch us live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Fridays. And we will see you again next Friday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
How dare you!